Hello, everyone. Welcome to Doctors Making a Difference. I'm your host, Dr. Peter Crane. I'm a physician in rural Idaho where I've been in practice since 2011. Over the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to be both a physician and a patient, and I've been so thankful for the doctors and other healthcare professionals who have helped me. I invite you to join us as we highlight physicians around the world who are making a difference in their communities and with their patients. Our goal is to give physicians and other healthcare professionals the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finances, and in life. What we do makes a tremendous difference for our patients and our communities. Please go to your podcast service or YouTube channel and give us a 5-star review and hit the like or subscribe button. It helps get the message out to others. You can also check out more content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Finally, if you would like to be on the show or have any questions or topics that you feel should be addressed on the show, please contact me. The easiest way to get in contact is to subscribe to the newsletter and then hit reply to any of the newsletter emails. Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. On today's show, we have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Brad Haupricht, a sports medicine physician who has practiced in Virginia for several years with a Division I athletics team and has subsequently transitioned to a telemedicine company. I think you'll find the visit fascinating. Brad has been one of my friends for many years, and I appreciate him taking the time to do this podcast. And I apologize for some of the audio glitches that are on this podcast. Please bear with me as we proceed with Doctors Making a Difference and Dr. Brad Haupricht. So today we've got Dr. Brad Haupricht here, one of my great friends from residency, and I've known Brad for a lot of years. Really thankful for you being on the show, Brad, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I guess tell me and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of go back and forth a little bit about what it is that makes you do what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Brad Haupricht. Like Peter, we've been physicians for 12, 13 years now.
Yeah, enough years to be used to it, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. So family medicine doc, live in central Virginia near the mountains. Married for 20 years tomorrow.
Nice, congrats.
Thanks. And then I have a 15-year-old daughter.
That's cool. No, I was thinking about that the other day. Like, it seemed like it was all new, and it still is. But after a few years, you kind of just been doing it for a while, and it becomes a little bit part of your identity. I think some people maybe get a little bit tripped up by that and say, like, I don't really want my identity to be just my career. But I think as a physician, you put so many years into it, it does a little bit become part of who you are and how you interact with other people to some degree. But
for sure. I mean, we had friends over tonight, and 3 times my career came up, right? So
yeah, well, they're just interesting, and that's one of the reasons for this podcast. I think it's really interesting what people do, and what's more personal than like your own health. And all of us are very mortal. We break. We have health problems, and it's one of the coolest things about our jobs is that you get to help people through various things in life, and you really never know what a person's going to deal with. So I think people are just sort of really fascinated with what physicians do, and it's interesting. So I guess that was, my question I was going to ask you is, when you think back to when you were a teenager, a young man, how did you decide eventually to become a doctor? I mean, I kind of like to harken back to that, like when days are hard, I think what made me actually take this crazy road to become a doctor? I was curious how you arrived at that, and then eventually how you arrived at choosing to be a sports medicine doctor.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you and I have ever had this conversation. So in 8th grade, John Grisham was like a big author at that time.
Oh yeah,
he was talking about law and protecting the little guy and that type of thing. And I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And then in January, my grandmother had a stroke. We as a family were visiting her. January in Ohio is snow and ice. And so my dad and I said, hey, race you to the car. And when I stepped off a curb, my left foot hit ice, my right foot did not. And so I had a tib-fib spiral fracture in the parking lot of the hospital. And so my dad, my dad's not a medical person. He said, let's just put you in the back of the car and we're going to throw a bag of snow on the rig and then we'll see how you feel in the morning. And I knew something was off. And I'm like, Dad, we're at the hospital. You got to take me into the hospital. And so he did. And when I was the patient and went through surgery and everything, it's like, this is fascinating. It combines the love of science that I've always had as a kid, and then this desire to help people and protect people. And so that's when I decided that's when I was going to go into medicine. When I started med school, I thought I was going to be a pediatric oncologist.
Wow.
Kind of real, very specific, but my faith is very important to me. And I kind of figured, what group of people need someone who can anchor in faith during one of those most difficult times in their life. And so that's where I started, wanting to really love on the kids, love on the parents. And then in med school, probably like most of us who go into primary care, I liked surgery. I liked OB. I liked internal medicine. I knew I didn't want to be a surgeon, though. That's always been pretty clear to me. But I liked it all. And then I did my family medicine rotation. I was like, man, this combines every piece that I like in one thing. I get to take care of people from babies to the grave, deliver babies. And so when I went to residency, I thought I was going to be just like you, honestly. Small town, family doc, taking care of everybody, where I've grown up, where I went to high school. And then it was in first year of residency. I don't remember when Dr. Hunt came in and says, hey guys, we have a football team coverage. Is anybody willing to do that? And I looked at our schedules and it worked for mine. Like all the home games were times I wasn't on call. I wasn't on boards. I was like, I can do it. I figured I was going to do the high school football games anyways. And then in that month, I just kind of fell in love with sports medicine.
That's awesome.
And so that's when I decided that I'd probably pursue sports medicine. My wife says that she knew from med school I should probably be in sports medicine.
Oh, so she recognized it early on. Interesting.
Yeah, she did.
Really? That's cool.
And she has a background kind of in that. She was kinesiology, exercise science in college, so she kind of had that background.
I went and did those same sideline things in residency, and my very first one, I don't know if I was there with you or not, but there was a guy that had a traumatic ankle dislocation on the football field. I'm like, holy cow.
Nope, not me.
So it was good, and I've worked in the ER, for 15 years now, if you count residency time, and so I've seen some of those crazy things. But I had that same thing, like, whoa, some crazy things can happen in football for sure.
And I've actually never seen that. So.
Yeah, well, I've never seen it since, not in football, but that first game I went to in residency, standing there, like I saw this young man and huge, horrible, ankle dislocation with an associated fracture, and it was nuts.
And not like high-level high school football, like
no, just like just regular old game.
Football, standard.
No, it was pretty cool. Well, so I guess that thinking about career path, you have been a sports medicine doctor, and I talked to you about this before, but I think it's really interesting. Maybe share with listeners a little bit about, you became sports medicine doctor, trained, and then you worked with a university and traveled all over. And I think if you were talking to a young aspiring physician, I think they would want to know, how do I become how do I go to a Division I school and work on their team? I think it's really cool. So do you mind walking us through that a little bit?
How is a really tough question. I think it was God's design. It was lucky. But that being said, it was awesome. And so after fellowship, if you're going to do it, you're definitely doing a year of fellowship. Yeah. So really have to dedicate yourself to that year and just kind of say, okay, this is the year I'm fully invested, because this is kind of the trajectory. And then when we were looking for jobs, there weren't a lot of universities who were just hiring. Most of the time it's part of an orthopedic group and it's pretty well buttoned up. And it just so happened that the university that I worked for a student health doc. The doctor was retiring, and they were kind of on this cusp. And so I walked into student health, and part of that was kind of setting up a sports medicine athletics program. He always had a team doc, but he had just always kind of done it on the side. And so I was the first person that they hired for this is a dedicated position. And so I kind of just worked out. And then for about 10 years, did that. I traveled to bowl games, traveled to March Madness, and just, small one-on-one games which were equally as exciting.
Well,
so
like you did it, and you just say like, oh yeah, I did it for 10 years. But you think about that, someone who's a aspiring physician or someone who's interested, say, I want to be on the sidelines of a Division I football game, and or a basketball game or whatever it may be, and I want to take care of the players and be involved in the day-to-day. And you've done it, and you've traveled all over the place. I got to go with you and one of our other friends to the sideline of a Division I football game. You invited us to be there, and it was awesome. I'm like, man, to get to watch games like that, I don't think I'll ever be able to just watch it from the sideline, from the stand, quite the same ever again as when you're right there watching the plays and the impacts. It's quite a different experience, especially at that level.
Well, and it's in some ways it's kind of like the Old Town family doc, and I'll explain why. You are eating with your patients. You're sleeping in the same building as your patients. You are, they're seeing you watch TV and joke around, and you're kind of in really close quarters for a lot. So you really get to know people.
Yeah, good point.
You know their families. You know where they came from, what baggage they have, all these different things that you don't get in a 15-minute appointment. And so it really started to have a very similar feel to that family doc who's just taking care of people through their whole lives, because a lot of these students are away from home. They don't have parents. This is the first time navigating healthcare. And so you kind of become this surrogate family to help them navigate life.
Well, this kind of harkens back to your original desire, thoughts to become kind of that all-inclusive doctor. So that's really cool, Brad. Like, you took that opportunity and ran with it, and for a lot of years traveled with the team and got to see some pretty cool things in athletics and get to know people. I just think it's a fascinating career, honestly.
Well, and I think philosophically, we're talking about the positive and where to do that. I think taking care of that whole person is always there. We just have to kind of seek it out. We have to be intentional about, okay, how am I going to help this person beyond just the diagnosis in my 15 minutes? It's hard sometimes, but it's still there. And so, because the person who's sitting across from you is that full person, so how do we reach into different parts of their lives and really help them fully when it's appropriate?
No, that's a really good point. And I think you could sort of apply that to any area of medicine, because like you pointed out earlier, people are really interested in what you do as a physician. And if you take a few minutes to get to know somebody and just take a brief second to talk to them and ask them about something in their life, you don't want to take up the whole visit time with that kind of stuff. But if you treat them like a person, they will honor that and be so thankful. And you've noticed the same thing. I feel like that emotional IQ, the ability to just relate with people for just a minute, is what people really trust. And then they will entrust you with their most difficult private things in their life. And it's quite an honor, quite a trust. And it sounds like you've had that on a sports medicine team, which is pretty cool.
And on the flip side, I think when you're not having a good day, or you're busy, or you're behind, and you are not that same warmth and friendly, the patients who know you, they don't judge you for that. They know that, oh, this isn't Peter, this isn't Brad. He must just have lots of others going on, and so we'll keep coming to him. We still love them.
They'll give you the benefit of the doubt, which is awesome.
They'll give you all grace.
Well, so I guess, do you have any highlights, or, I mean, you can't share anything that's HIPAA protected, but anything that you would highlight as like a couple of your coolest experiences as a sports medicine doctor?
Oh, there's so many. yeah, like you said, there's I have to be careful with HIPAA protection. But this person never sought medical care outside of us, so this will be fine. We're at a football stadium. I won't say where, but we'll just say the stands are very close to the field.
Okay.
And so the amount of space between the out of bounds line and where the fans sit is smaller than this office room that I'm sitting in. And so third quarter comes around and it's a TV timeout, and this school throws out Twinkies.
Really?
And so they're tossing Twinkies. The cheerleaders tossing Twinkies. All these people are.
Everybody has some diabetes. Throw out the Twinkies.
That's probably true. And the crowd is going nuts for Twinkies. All right. And then all of a sudden, about 5 rows behind us, people are starting waving their hands, and they're like, "We need medical attention. We need medical attention." The EMS for the football stadium were on the other side, and this is a bowl, and so they would have to have gone all the way around and then get down to the person. And then, so they said, "We need medical attention. Somebody's choking." So I jump up on a table. I jump up into the stands. This guy is laying down now. He's passed out. So I start doing chest compressions.
Oh my goodness.
Here comes a Twinkie. The guy sits up and he's like, "Oh." He's like, "Oh, thanks, doc."
It was a Twinkie? Oh my goodness.
And so the stands start clapping, and I hop back down, and one president of the university writes to the other president of the university saying thank you for our services. And
oh my goodness.
It's just one of those kind of obscure, you never know what's going to happen.
Well, it could have been, not to joke about death, but death by Twinkie is a little bit unrealistic. That's crazy. Unbelievable.
That would be a very obscure.
Oh my goodness.
I haven't had a Twinkie in 20 years.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
So yeah, that was one of those just kind of, you walk away and you're like, oh, but you thank God for your training, for the opportunity to be there, and just to help somebody in that moment. There was one particular athlete, life-altering injury. And it wasn't so much taking care of that injury at the time, but then over the next 12 months, 24 months, walking with a person, going through a whole scope of emotions, right? They were Division I athlete, and then they weren't. And so their whole identity was kind of wrapped up in, and what they wanted to do with their life afterwards was all tied to their athleticism. And so to walk through that was really hard at times. It was really emotional at times. But then you see the person today, and you have this really special relationship, and you see how they've come, and actually they're now competing back in athletics.
Oh, really? How cool.
Amazing recovery, but they're now outside of college. So just to have that kind of whole scope and walk with somebody just really kind of boils down what would happen often, where you're just walking with people. I had one patient where he was a local kid. He ended up playing on the football team, but I also took care of his mom and his dad and his sister, and so it was just fun to have Dad would come in, we'd talk football a little bit, and then now we'll get back to talking about you, and so just to kind of develop those relationships. You really develop special relationships with the athletic training staff, and because they're your eyes and ears a lot of times, and so kind of like the nursing staff in your clinic. Obviously, it was really neat to travel to the big stadiums and the March Madness, and I'll always remember that.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. That's, if you're a young person without a family, the travel sounds amazing. And if you're into that, maybe a different chapter of life doesn't invite that quite as much, but so cool, Brad. And I guess that's one question I was going to ask you is, what this podcast is called Doctors Making a Difference. In what way, I mean, if you were talking to someone who was considering that as a career, I mean, what would you say makes the biggest difference to people as you've interacted with them as a sports medicine doctor?
That's a good question. I think a lot of times when dealing with high-level athletes, whatever that is, whether it's professional, semi-professional, Division III, Division I, any time where somebody puts a lot of time into their sport, when they go through an injury, the studies have shown that their levels of grief are basically like a second-degree relative dying.
Oh, really?
So not mom, dad, brother, sister, but like the next level, right? And so because they're just so many of their hours and their identity is so wrapped up into this. And so anytime you can walk through with them of, hey, this is what's happened, this is what this is going to look like, and we're going to be here with you and help you navigate this, I think that's when you make the biggest difference. A lot of times they don't have hope. But they also don't want to just have like this false, everything's going to be okay, there. So having that capacity to say, this is bad. This is really tough for you. But we're going to walk through this together. We're going to be with you, and just give them that hope and kind of give them that security that they will get through it. And that, I think, is probably where you make the biggest difference. The flip side, sports medicine isn't just athletes of the highest level. And so there was one patient I had, and I'm sure you've had similar patients, but from the sport, they came in and saw me for knee pain. And we started talking about what the cause of their knee pain was. And one of their causes of knee pain was weight. And so we talked about diet and exercise and recognizing, hey, weight loss is tough. And especially when your knee hurts. But if you lost 10 pounds, your knee's going to feel a lot better. So let's start there. And they came back 2 months later, and they're like, Doc, what you said really lit a fire, and I've lost 30 pounds.
Holy cow.
Great.
Wow.
The best I've ever felt. And I'm not trying to take too much credit. I've said that to hundreds of people, and I don't have that story for hundreds of times.
No, none of us do, but it's awesome when somebody they actually listened to me.
They definitely did the hard work.
Yeah.
But, again, it was looking at, we could just throw medicine at the knee pain and just kind of walked into the next patient and called it good. But that's, I think, where you made the difference and really probably changed the trajectory for much longer than any sport or anything. Because it's going to affect their long-term life. Oh yeah, for sure. No, that's awesome, and I think you have the ability to have such a tremendous influence on people, especially at a lot of times they're in kind of the young adult life and making a lot of choices that are going to impact them and maybe even their children and other people based on kind of how those decisions go. So pretty cool, Brad. One of the things on this that I think is important for everybody. There's tons of negative about medicine in general, like the burnout and the electronic medical record systems and insurance and yada, yada, yada. So my question is, how have you, especially during the sports medicine highlight years and then even what you're doing now, how have you found a way to sort of stay balanced or stay sane? Because the job is a little bit crazy sometimes, for sure, no matter what field you're in, but in particular in your field, how have you found a way to kind of stay centered and balanced? Yeah, no, I think there's a few keys. Number one, kind of always harkening back to, I get to do this. It's the 14-year-old kid who wanted to go into medicine. I get to help people like I always wanted to.
Yeah.
But to your point, on a Friday night at 6 p.m., it's sometimes hard to keep that right at the front of your mind.
That's true.
Or if you're missing something from your family to take care of a patient or be at a sporting event. And so the other things are First and foremost, when I'm with my family, I really try to be fully engaged with my family. My faith is always really important to me, so that always kind of keeps me centered and anchored. I found that when I exercise, I have a lot more margin for an energy to give to others because I've taken that time. We've talked about it a little bit, but I also really love the outdoors. And so I found that I really need to schedule kind of regular time in the outdoors away from everybody. That's me. That's kind of how I'm wired. And so all those things, if anyone starts kind of faltering the amount of energy Brad can give to the patients or coworkers or anybody on the team just goes down. Wow. And so keeping all those things as a higher priority is always really important. I like to share the quote of the person that they were the dean of the medical school. I think we've talked about it before, but they looked at me on the day I interviewed for medical school and they said, listen, I love my job, but I love God, I love my husband, I love my kids, and then my job is number 5. And so they said, anytime I'm with my job, I'm away from those 4. And so as much as I love my job, I always got to keep those other ones kind of above. And I think that's actually really important from a burnout standpoint. I think we put so much effort and energy into our jobs, and then there's those times of frustration, and we kind of go, what's it for? Mm-hmm. And instead of just course correcting a little bit, people just walk away. Right. Or do something different, just kind of throw their hands up out of frustration. And so by keeping those other things as higher priorities, then that job that we love stays healthy.
Oh, that's awesome. That's like a perfect roadmap, because I feel like, every doctor goes through kind of a burnout time. No matter what you're in, you get kind of fried. You're like, I'm done. I got to take a break. So I love that you talked about how, find those things that are really core to who you are that made you choose this career in the first place. And especially, spending time outdoors, exercising, spending time with family and faith. I mean, those are key to your success as a human being, but as a physician especially. And I think it's interesting to note that there's like only, relative to the population of the United States, there's only like about 1.2 million licensed physicians in the United States. And a lot of those folks are not necessarily practicing full time. So it is a unique skill set, and it's relatively rare. And during COVID, there were a lot of people that exited the field of medicine because it was stressful and there's a lot of frustrating parts of it. But like you've talked about, it's finding the way to connect with the patient, and it's finding time to control your time and making sure you get enough exercise and taking care of your soul, because doctors are not robots. I tell my wife that all the time. Today was a robot day. I gotta reconnect with who I am. So that was awesome advice. I think that's really good for every one of us. And I think, again, some of the listeners are physicians, some are aspiring physicians, and it's good to kind of think about through that process, no matter what you do. So I was thinking, Brad, during COVID especially, you transitioned just a little bit from exclusively sports medicine to add a little bit of primary care and sports medicine back in on the telemedicine realm. And I'd like to hear a little bit about that and how that's kind of affected your career trajectory and life balance, and just kind of talk us through that a little bit. It's really quite a fascinating, interesting thing that you've done.
Yeah, it was. So it goes back to kind of what we were just talking about. A lot of time with sports medicine is nights and weekends at sporting events. They're awesome. They're a lot of fun. But when I was on the sideline, I wasn't with my family. And as we already talked about, my daughter was starting to get into her own activities, own sports. And so I started thinking about what's my exit strategy? How am I going to be invested in my own daughter's life and not necessarily at somebody else's kids' sporting events, at least simultaneously? And right around that same time, I honestly just saw a commercial for telehealth, and I was like, huh, I wonder what this whole thing is about. This is actually, no, COVID was going on at that point. It was kind of, it was a couple months into COVID. So telehealth was just kind of rudimentary, mostly doctors with practices who were just trying to find ways to see their patients, which is great. Like that was really meeting a need. And then simultaneously, a few different telehealth companies were launching. And honestly, for me, it was one of those like, I think telehealth's going to be here. So now seems like maybe a good time to just try it. Realistically, I thought it was going to be a year or two, and then kind of find something else, maybe go into kind of that full scope family practice again with a little bit of sports medicine specialist. Maybe go into more of like a sports medicine clinic without the university piece.
Right, without all the travel, perhaps.
Right. Yeah. So all these different things were kind of bouncing around, and it's like telehealth will allow me some time to just have some flexibility and have some stability as income while I'm kind of figuring out these other pieces, and maybe kind of like turn one nozzle off and turn the other nozzle on kind of simultaneously. And then I really kind of started enjoying. And the reason is not just from a lifestyle standpoint. I'll talk about that in a second, but it really started to do a couple different things for me. From a professional standpoint, it was now managing other clinicians, physicians, nurse practitioners, starting to, since it was a startup company at the time, it was starting to have a integral role in what's this going to look like? How would we do sports medicine through telehealth? And things of that nature, kind of having kind of playing with that creative side of my brain, kind of engineering things, if you will, how a new system is going to work.
Yeah.
And so you had that piece. And then it also afforded me the luxury to go to all my daughter's sporting events, kind of to work from wherever I am. We have to meet some requirements. Like it's not just Brad sitting on the beach with sunglasses typing away, but like we keep a professional when we're working. With that being said, I could be in Idaho, for instance.
Right. Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. We should talk about that in a minute, but you could be like anywhere with internet connection with a professional kind of environment. That's pretty cool.
So, and then it's really starting to grow, and especially the organization I'm with, where we're really starting to try to reach patients who are in medical deserts, places where they can't easily access medical resources. But most of those people have smartphones. And so we're really starting to reach into different places and think about, okay, how can we get care to people who are disenfranchised for whatever reason, whether it's just difficult to access, they've kind of burnt the bridges in local clinics because it's hard for them to get to appointment times on time, whatever it is. And so it's been interesting to see, like, okay, I don't think telehealth is going to replace the primary care doctor by any means. But I do think it probably will come alongside and take care of patients in another way so that the person's getting that full care and meeting them where they need, so they don't necessarily have to take off of work. To come to the doctor's office, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it increases access in a really unique way. Yeah, and your training as a primary care doctor affords you the understanding and the background to be able to do that. That's cool. And one thing I wanted to this podcast, I just to kind of highlight a little bit what Brad did for me. I went through this big health problem and had to have surgery for a big tumor, and it was kind of this rotten time. And I was in this small town, not a medical desert. We're blessed to have some colleagues, but there just weren't that many of us. And my practice partner at that time of the previous 10 years had moved, and I had to be gone. And really, my patients would have no doctor. There was none, and it wasn't easy to get like a locums doctor or a service to just come in and take care of it because it's such a unique thing. And so at that time, Brad and one of my other friends contacted me and both said, hey, we've just made some changes in our career path, and if you need us to come to Idaho and do your job for a few weeks, we'll be there. And it was a pretty awesome, special opportunity for me to work with two of my friends from residency and to turn my practice over to them. And so as Brad's talking about, as you're talking about the opportunity to help people wherever you're at, it's pretty cool. And you kind of moved to Idaho for a few weeks, and you could still do your telemedicine job, and you contracted with my little hospital and did my job, and it was pretty cool. And I guess the thing that I thought about when you told me that, and as we've talked today, is I suppose sometimes people feel trapped in their jobs, like that nothing could change, and I have to continue this exact career trajectory or I'll miss out on opportunity X, Y, or Z. But I think as a physician, your training is broad, your understanding is broad, and really, like I said before, the number of physicians relative to the number of actual patients and the need is high. And so you have a lot of career flexibility. And so, Brad, you've been able to do a career transition as you're in a new chapter of life with your daughter getting older. And I think it's pretty cool. You combine a little bit of telemedicine, sports medicine, and even tried out your hand at locums in Idaho when there was a need that arose. And it really filled such a need. It was awesome to know that I could turn my practice over to you and one of our other friends that I knew could just take over. And it was awesome. It was such a cool thing to be able to just use that skill set and jump in and do it. It was really a cool thing that happened that way.
Yeah, I mean, it was equally cool for me. Like, to work with you guys again was such a great time. It was like no time had passed. But then it also connected me just to what I originally envisioned my practice.
That's true. Back to the small town family doctor.
Yeah, small town family doctor. At largely rural community. Topography is a little bit different. Otherwise,
that's true. Virginia versus Idaho, they're quite different.
Ohio versus Virginia.
And Ohio, yeah, no doubt.
Ohio versus Idaho. But yeah, no, and it just was perfect time, right? Like the fact that I could work Eastern Standard Time and it wasn't all that disruptive to that job, and I could still be a benefit to the folks in Idaho. It was pretty perfect.
My patients still talk about that doctor whose last name they couldn't pronounce. That Dr. Haupricht. They couldn't say Brad Haupricht, but it was awesome. And I think, like I was saying before, that it demonstrates the flexibility of jobs, and it comes in chapters. When you first finish medical school residency, you've got usually most people have loans, and they need to kind of get established and get some experience. But you spend somewhere in your 30s and in your 40s and 50s, you really only get access to maybe 3 or 4 decades as a physician, just because it takes so many years to get the degree. And I think sometimes people feel trapped, and that leads to the burnout. But it's nice to know people have options. And one of the things I hope is that to encourage more people to stay in medicine, but be a little bit flexible. And part of that, and it's kind of the lesson's been driven home in my mind with this big tumor I had and the whole recovery process, is we have to be financially prepared for whatever. And part of that's having a job that provides financial stability. Part of it's making sure you have good life insurance and good disability insurance and all those things. I know I've had done that, but I'd never really thought about it quite the same as when you realize, oh, hey, this could all be over and it's important to do it. So I was curious if you had any advice for people on the financial stability, protect yourself from kind of financial harm, because you don't want to cripple your family by leaving them with a bunch of medical school debt without a plan to take care of it. On the other hand, I would never discourage somebody from pursuing medicine based on the finances, because there's a way forward for people who want to do it. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I'll speak a little bit more globally, but I will say you going through everything you went through was kind of a gut check for me as well. Like,
Yeah.
here's somebody who's healthy and doing everything right, and still life happens.
Yeah,
right?
no doubt.
And we all know that it could go lots of different ways from there. And so that piece was eye-opening. We're not I don't want to say like immortal.
Yeah.
And we know that.
Yeah.
But the day to day, it kind of feels like it, right? Like, I don't expect anything bad to happen, but it could.
Right. I mean, I was 43 and suddenly dealing with something that could have been a life-ending diagnosis is pretty sobering for sure.
Totally, yeah. But I think for me, where I've seen young physicians get in the most trouble is they want to live in the house that they expect a doctor to live in. They want to drive the car that they expect a doctor to drive. Want to take the vacations that they expect a doctor to take. They've spent a lot of time kind of dedicated to arriving, and so now they're wanting to enjoy the fruits of their labors.
Right.
So it's understandable. But I mean, we both know a whole lot of physicians who live paycheck to paycheck, essentially.
Right.
Because they live beyond their means, and just struggle. And if you're just all of a sudden the patients are means to a paycheck, and then you're worried about, if I don't bill a certain amount, I'm going to be behind. There's all these different pieces. It's really going to just add to that. You're going to lose sight of why we're doing what we're doing. And not to say all those things aren't important. Like, you need to be good at billing, you need to be good at all of those pieces. But if it's a focus, that's when you lose sight of why you got into medicine.
Right. No, I think it's so wise to do that, because one of the things that I hope everybody, including myself, will focus on is achieving kind of that financial independence where you say, hey, I've got a plan. And if I don't get my notes done on time or something like that, not that I don't want to, but it's not like we're just in this house of cards that's going to fall down. And also, when you have an employer that might ask something that's a little bit unreasonable, you can be like, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to change it. And a lot of times, if you stand up for yourself a little bit in the name of good patient care and good taking care of the physicians and your peers and colleagues, a lot of times you're respected for it if you do it in a polite way. But you don't have the power to do that if you feel like you're financially crippled. And I think doctors are better doctors if they have a path toward financial independence and stability. And it's been a highlight to me to make sure get good insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, etc., and then have a plan to set aside, a good percentage of your income to try to save. So if you save up, especially in those early years, and realize that until you're probably about 40, you're kind of broke as you pay back everything. And once you're back to broke, then you can start saving a little bit. And then you can envision some of those things that you might say, you got a house or a vacation or something like that. But if you try to do it when you're in your first 2 or 3 years out of residency, you sort of cripple yourself and you don't get the benefits from the financial investment and the interest and all that kind of stuff. It kind of works against you. So I think what you said is really wise. You don't want to live paycheck to paycheck as a physician. It doesn't make any sense.
And I think, to your point, like that, knowing that there are options out there so that you don't ever feel like you're painted into a corner. So if that job has some expectations that are unrealistic, that are compromising those top 5 things that we were talking about,
exactly,
then you can know and rest that there's other options.
Right, and if you've played your financial cards well, you don't have to worry about them quite as much, because you say, well, if I need to do a career pivot or cut back to a lower number of hours or something that is a little more fulfilling but maybe not pay as much, or I need to pivot to something that does pay more because of whatever. You have the freedom and flexibility to do it if you have lived in such a way to kind of be financially prepared. So I think it's pretty important in this conversation to make sure people don't get themselves financially crippled as they come out of medical school, because that's what I hear when I go to high schools and talk to people about medical careers. They're always so worried about the cost and the amount of time it takes to get into it, and yet we should be able to live in a way so that doesn't cripple us. And there's a lot of opportunities, and it sounds like you have figured out how to avoid burnout or at least overcome it and make a career shift if needed, and take care of patients, in the best way that they need to be taken care of. I think it's pretty cool, Brad. Well, do you? No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I honestly, it feels like my steps have been orchestrated all along the way, and so I can't take credit, but it's been a fun ride. I'm excited to see where the next, stage comes, and kind of hold it with open hands and just kind of be ready for the ride.
No, that's awesome. Well, any last thoughts or anything you would share with our audience on kind of how to make a difference, how to make a difference in this world as a physician and be able to be a good physician?
Honestly, I think making a difference in the world is the same for all of us. It's just loving others like you want your family members taken care of. And so in medicine, we get to do that in a very personal, intimate way, really, because we're, like you said before, we're dealing with a person's own body and something we know more about their own body than they do. And so they're coming to us and they're intrigued and they're wondering and they're scared. And so if you come at that with sterility and you kind of forget that there's the person there, it's harder to make a difference. You may make the diagnosis, but to make a difference, you have to love the person. And so I think that's really true whether you're serving coffee or, making auto parts or getting to take care of patients. It's how do I love people? But I really love how I personally get to do it. It's not for everybody, and that's great. But for those of us who are called to do it, it's an honor for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a wise thought, because it really is not about what you're doing, but how you do it. That makes the biggest difference. I love it. So, well, Brad, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. I think this will be inspirational to lots of people, and I think it inspires me. Like I said, you've personally helped me and been a good example to me throughout my life, and I appreciate you taking the time to participate in the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Okay, thanks. Talk to you later, Brad.
All right, bye.
Bye.